First up, I had an invisible day yesterday. Actually, it's been an invisible couple of days. That sounds weird, right? Like, what is an invisible day? It's just a name that I came up with for um, not being able to go out, like, not only physically and in terms of connectivity, but energetically, um, to uh, others. So for me, what an invisible day looks like, and it started the other day, was I've fired off messages to a number of people, whether it was friends or other people that are involved in this. I reached out to my old teacher and another guy that I'm going to be bringing onto the channel here, and it was just crickets. It was total crickets. And I've had other invisible days like that, and they're just the strangest thing. The other days are like when you're in the grocery store and nobody sees you. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to be able to round on this point and connect it to specifically to our fitted models of what awakening is, but these are things that that happen here that are just bizarre, that I never really noticed before. And I kept reaching out and I kept reaching out and not getting any response. And the funny thing is that underneath the reaching out, there's always that clarity that's there. Like, the clarity is so strong now in terms of when there's a really strong sense of an identified person, or when there's little hints of it, or when there's something from the old, like an old shadow that wants to come up. And for me, as I've said in previous videos, mine was validation. Mine was always validation. It was a need to be seen. And in life, before I ever started, before I ever knew about any of this subject or anything, it was really silly stuff like, look at my talents, look at what I can do, and acknowledge me. And there's a sense of that false identity, or that constructed identity that gets validated and then gets reborn back into existence. When I got validated, and for those few moments, you feel like everything's like okay, like it's better. Oh yes, I exist again, or at least what I want to project, or or a sense of need is fulfilled. So it was like very temporarily. And I noticed through the course of my life that I spent an awful lot of time trying to be good at just about anything, and ended up being pretty good at a lot of stuff. I don't. The sad part is that I don't know that I necessarily enjoyed a lot of it because of the validation. Just as an example, I was a DJ in like the rave scene and stuff for a long time. And I started in the early 90s, and that was pretty fun. And then I got rid of it, or I just stopped doing it. And then about 10 years ago, I got back into it again. And part of it, my passion for music was ignited again, so on and so forth. But the projection that I had of how people would respond to when I played, or how a certain mix had gone, or I was watching the crowd, or in my case, really watching the other DJs, watching my peers, to make sure that they approved of what it was I was doing, was so strong that every time before I played a gig, I can remember having what they would call like an accelerated sense of stage fright. And in other words, it's just this massive, massive, massive panic attack. And, you know, I've heard all sorts of performers and musicians talk about, okay, you know, we get this, you know, little stage fright, this little nervousness, and as soon as the first chord hits, or you're into the first song, or you start the first track, it all goes away. And I found mine just wouldn't go away. And it was like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour of just like, and I might be playing a 2-hour set and just wanting to throw up the whole time. The last big like festival I played, it was one of the few times that I had decided, this was some years ago, I want to say this was like 2019 or something, I had decided to not drink, because, you know, I absolutely fueled that, you know, had to tamp down some of that frustration and some of that fear and that anxiety with just a couple of beers right here. And I remember that everyone responded really well, but I remember the whole time that I was just ultra panicked until like the last 2 or 3 tracks, and then that was it. And I got off, and everyone said, "Oh, it was amazing." And it was like so dissatisfying. I'm like, yeah, but I absolutely suffered through this whole thing, you know. And I bring it up just to, at least for me, it's relevant in, we carry around these projected identities of how we want people to see us, and they can be based in just about anything. Anything. I want to be seen. I don't want to be seen. I want to be validated. And that is so strong in all of us. I think it absolutely translates to getting into like spiritual communities, or getting into meditation or awakening stuff, and like we want to be seen, right? It's just bonkers. So when those invisible days come up, they used to cause me a little bit, they used to cause me a lot of consternation, you know, a lot of like, and now with the clarity around it, it's as if something is just saying, no matter what my best efforts were at the moment, is just sit, you know, just stay in that space of silence. Stay in quietude. There's no need to necessarily reach out, because, and it's not like this all the time, when there's that sense of need, when there's that sense of longing, where's that sense of need to connect, it can potentially sometimes come from a super unhealthy place. Hey, tap, 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 over here. I can remember taking all that stuff very personally when people wouldn't respond. It's different now. It's more like in another area for examination. And yesterday I just went, well, I'm invisible today. Now it's pretty nice. In the last year or so, I noticed there was this big push after tons of, I like to call them aperture openings. You can call them shifts. You can call it when stuff drops away. I noticed this last great big push of what I will call the mundane, or the relative, or the me, the ego. That's such a weird one, using ego, before really settling into just like nothingness, just settling into the moment. There was this last big push I felt like I was in this barren wasteland. And what I mean by this last big push is all these things that I used to do suddenly had a tremendous amount of appeal again. And I've been through that point where that stage where everything loses its, where you just no longer, where you're just no longer interested in doing stuff. All the old stuff falls away, and you're like, well, I don't identify with this anymore, and I don't like this. I'm not really necessarily into this job that I do, and my hobbies are no longer fulfilling. So that started a while ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago. That really began to ramp up. And then as this feeling of being corralled into just this moment, into right here, there was like that last desperate, I'm moving my hands like a T-Rex. There was that last desperate grab at one of those, and it never made it to like a conscious thought or idea of, well, I'll just do this and and this will give me joy, or this will reify the ego. It was much subtler than that, but yet internally the urgings were so strong. One of them was like, oh, okay, get back into producing music again. Oh, and I'd be like, this is amazing. Now there's all this clarity. I'll bet you what I do just turns out amazing. And then boom, right after that, like moments after that, woof, this whole projection unfolded, like almost like watching a movie. Like I could see it and what it would look like. And then I would put this music out there, and other music producers would be like, hey, this is amazing, you're amazing, and it would blow up, and it would so on and so on and so on, and it just kept going. And or being what my chosen career was being and I still do this for a living, which is tattooing. And ooh, if I just really apply myself now, I'll just take the art world by storm. I'll do this amazing thing, and then people will gather around, and my Instagram will blow up, and I will feel validated again. And I think I went through 3 or 4 different, completely different versions of those. Most of them were reminiscent of the things that I had gotten into before, or they were versions of it before it started to become very clear. Like this was this last push, this last like, okay, I'm going to try to be something. I'm going to try to be a solid entity. I'm going to try to be a whatever the fuck, fill in the blank. And I will be able to avoid tipping over the edge, going into this crazy free fall of I have no idea what is happening. I will be able to finally have some success in doing this, and I'll be able to avoid this crazy void that's just right in front of me. And when that dawned on me, I just kind of, I just sort of shook my head and went, I just can't. Not only do I not have the will, because when these things would come up, it would be a flash, and it would be a flash that would last, and like a sort of a physical rush in the body, it would be a flash that would last, I don't know, a minute, or maybe even a whole day. But then would just, as soon as there was this thought of this attention moving into, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. Still got the software on my laptop. I'm gonna sit down. I would just, and I would just fizzle out and deflate and go, maybe not so much. And it's just another reminder, whether it's the invisible day, where something that feels separate is reaching out, going, hey, over here, or let's go over here and create this other thing. Something is reaching out to try to sort of recreate itself, but I'm not in charge of that. It becomes no longer an option, and that can be super terrifying. Or at the very least, it doesn't have to be so dramatic as terrifying. It can be super uncomfortable. It can be very disappointing. That tied into something that I got really angry about, and then immediately after that got deeply sad about. Was like, I think here I go. I think I mentioned this in one of my earlier videos of like, okay, I wanted Ted to be saved in this. Ted was going to come out of this on the other side, enlightened. You know, it was like the $6 million Ted. It was going to be better, stronger, faster, and I was going to get to be here to witness the whole thing. I meaning the thoughts, the projected sense of ego, the projected identity, the constructs. We're all going to get to be there, you know, or else none of it didn't matter. What the fuck did I go through all of this for? And it was with great sadness that I went, he doesn't get to come. And this shaking of the fist at God or something, or life or universe or whatever you want to call it, going, why? You were supposed to save me. Because that's what every religion, that's what, in the beginning of starting this, like spiritual paths or Buddhism or whatever, all say in one form or another, or we can interpret. Religions will tell you that you get to be saved. And then we might fill in the blanks on Buddhism and this and that and the other, and they go, you get to be enlightened. You get to be enlightened. And that's just not the case. That has nothing to do with reality whatsoever. It's okay to have that, and I think it's necessary, and I think it seems to be like it's mandatory, but that's not how it ends up in the end. We don't get to bring us with us, nor do we get to pick and choose and decide which parts of the personality or the preferences or the habits or the patterns or and I mean the stuff that we like, you know. I like this food, I like this, I like that. You may bring some of those with you, but we don't get to choose any of those which go or stay. There's stuff now that's completely disinteresting to me that I found so fascinating for so long. When I stepped away from my tattooing career from tattooing for a couple of years, I had a bunch of people message me, oh, what a fucking shame, you're so talented, no, you know, and I'm like, you can't even, because that's the way you see me. When you look at the form here, this is what you see, and you only see me in terms of what it is that I present to you in social media, or what tattoo I might have done on you, or the mantra given by society that talent can be wasted, that if you have a talent, you're supposed to use it. And that's just not an absolute truth. And how was I going to explain to them like that I just was completely disinterested in it? That everything that I had done was tied up into, look at me, look at my stuff, look at what I can do. Here's this, you know, here's this tattoo thing that I did. Quick story, if I may. I went to a tattoo convention. Well, let me back up. So I did the tattoo convention for a while, circuit for a while. And a couple of times I won some awards in some smaller conventions where the competition wasn't that fierce. Let's just be very accurate about it. And I kind of went, oh, and that hit the validation nerve here. And when I was established where I was living at the time and had my own shop and a number of clients, I was at this point where I could pick and choose what I wanted to do. And this tattoo convention was coming up, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to set up all these clients at certain times, because they, at the end of every day at a tattoo convention, they do awards, and they do awards in different categories. You know, it might be the best color tattoo, or the best black and gray tattoo, best realistic, best, you know, so on and so forth, all these different categories. So I looked at at a category for each day and went, okay, I feel pretty comfortable with this particular one, and chose 3 and went, I'm going to line up all my clients. And that coincide with these, and I invited them all to the convention, which was just down the street. Told them, hey, I'll give you guys a better deal. Let me just flex. Let me do this thing, you know, and we're going to put it into a contest. And then, of course, I did the tattoo, and the judging's late at the end of the night, and I'm having these poor clients just sit around, waiting around, you know, hoping to enter into these contests. And I showed up absolutely thinking I was a somebody in this. And first of all, I had a miserable time the entire time. It was awful. And then, and you guys already know where this is going, right? I entered all these tattoos into these contests. And how many did I win? 0! Fuck. And it was the most humbling thing that I had ever done. And at the time I knew it. I mean, at the time it stung, you know. So to have so much validation tied up into something, and then just to walk away from it where you're just disinterested, right? It's just, it's bizarre. So to have all of these things resurface again after all of this time, it became very clear that this was a last gasp. Like there was something being avoided, or the imaginary mind, if we want to pretend that it's an entity, just for conversation's sake, let's just do that just for this moment. Let's just pretend. Okay, I realize the non-dual police are probably watching, but for conversation's sake, that this was this last gasp of this identity of like, no, here, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, and it all settles down, and at some point you quit. You go, it's fruitless and pointless, and was never satisfying in the beginning anyway. So what's on the other side of that, though, isn't always terrifying. I do paint a specific picture, I suppose, when I'm sharing videos. And the intent here, I think, has been to show that you go through some horrible stuff, or the struggles, because it's relatable, you know. But that's not always the case either. So it's not always terrifying. There's this sense, this of just like, I don't have to navigate anymore. I don't have to do anything other than here is now this. And those are all complete sentences by themselves. There's nothing else to be done. There may be responses in those moments, there may be assessments, there may be all sorts of stuff, but those feel very different than projecting off into a what if, or what could have been, or what should have been. And I found it so funny and so laughable that after being in this for so many years, that it took so long to hear the simplest thing of it's just now. It's just this. And I would have told you the whole time had you asked me. Oh yeah, of course. It's just this. I mean, it's fucking remedial. Yeah, of course. But when the wondrous, the enormity, and the simplicity of when you go, oh my God, that's really, wait a minute, no. And it can't be. There's just no way. It's just that, no. Come on. Well, then what's all the smoke and mirrors for? And what's all the woo woo? And what's all the mystics? And why are these guys over there just walking around in their underwear? And these people over there are wearing funny fucking hats. And what's the big fucking deal? If it's just this. And then there was a different level of fear that came up that was like, oh, can I really only just be right here? And then then the bargaining comes up, or at least it tries to come up. Yeah, bargaining with pieces of our identity. Okay, I'll give you this, but not this. You can have that, but not this. I'm not in charge. You're not even there to be in charge. Every time, and I've only done a few, like we're just starting to share out to the interwebs. Every time I start and press that record button, usually right before, I'm like, who the fuck are you talking to? There's nobody. And I don't mean that in a dismissive sense. I mean that in like, it's like it relieves the pressure of having to have it come out a certain way, of having to have an agenda, of having to project as somebody that knows something, somebody that has something to teach somebody. Just ridiculousness, absolute foolishness. You can say that this is one I've been wanting to cut. This is one that's really been rattling around for a while. You can say that you let these things go as the person, as the identity. And I mean, I have a whole bit, a whole shtick, a whole rant about this one. There is no such thing as the person letting go. Surrender is impossible, as you know it, from the standpoint of human will. Now, that's not to say that there aren't things that we might do to go through the motions of surrender, right? You're going to keep doing that. And the closest thing that I found that was even close to a surrender, or felt like a letting go, was a moving of the attention back into like the body. But so often the way the surrender or letting go it is shared about is it seems like it's either a direct like will, like you're wrenching your will and repressing thoughts, which is what it's doing, or basically like, oh, I'm just not going to think about it anymore. Or maybe it's like some big type of event or ceremony where you sit down and surrender. It isn't that. These things, these movements of energy that causes suffering, these old ways of thinking, just drop. They are surrendered on your behalf. They are let go on your behalf. My experience, the experience here is that, yes, we will get little bonuses sometimes. We get freebies where you might notice at some point, you go, oh, well, that's just no longer there anymore. But the vast majority of them, by and large, is it has to be seen as an energetic movement, and it's got to fizzle out. It's got to play itself out. And that's why I think the more accurate speakers talk about exhaustion during the process, talk about failure during the process. If you're seeing somebody that's talking about this force of will, and here's 3 steps to surrender. Here's how to do this. I know I've been on a sick one lately about the how videos. You're just like, what are you talking about? It's okay, fine. Just go share your how-to. Not that they might not have any benefit. They might not. Maybe perhaps those exercises, just like practice, meditation won't make you enlightened, but it's beneficial. So we're not going to say dismiss everything and throw it all out and say it's not beneficial. But ultimately, at the end, after all your effort and all that, it's exhaustion where you just go, that's just run out. And something that has nothing to do with you just goes, man, I'm cool. Like, it just drops. But I think hearing that can cause a sense of clench and a sense of apprehension and a sense of fear if you're hearing it while you're in the middle of wrestling with one of these identity attributes, or really a shadow piece, some old trauma that's coming up, some fear that's coming up, that's really just throttling you, that's got you in a chokehold. And you're like, really? I just have to wait? So it's totally natural and normal to bring in a sense of hope, or a sense of determination, or a sense of let me counter this with the steps to let go, with how do I surrender. It's totally fine. And you're not going to be able to stop it anyway, because that's going right along with it. It has to run itself out. Feeling into stuff, I think, is about as effective as a way as any other, which is what I was saying, is bringing the attention back into the body. That's what has been effective here, of just noticing the sensations in the body. And even that sounds a little too neutral, especially if you're really, really triggered and you're like sad, fear, angry. And I didn't come up with these words, but I grabbed onto them and then used them and became fully effective. Adyashanti was the first one that I've heard, and I've heard numerous people afterwards, because there's such wisdom in it, going, let's say you're feeling fear, can you fully be fear? And you're not going to be able to do it all the time. It's not always appropriate for extreme trauma at all times. But generally speaking, can you just be fear? Can you just let it be there? And when I first started doing it, it was like it's something that was almost like a direct sense of I am fear. And after a while, and after getting used to it, I realized, okay, this isn't going to kill me. And also, what's this sensation feel like? And not the closer I got to it, but the more the energy, the attention was brought into it, it began to have a very it didn't feel any different than anything else. That I had to go out into mind, into thought, into the realm of assessment to say, how is this different than what it feels like right now to feel my butt on the chair here. At best, I could interpret it as being more intense. Perhaps, relatively speaking, located somewhere different. Okay, it's right here. And that was it. Glad everybody's here. Grateful for the tiny amount of support that's happening. So, thanks, guys. Till next time.